Welcome everybody, and thanks for coming. Thanks to Brian for hosting us here. And just to get us started, just a brief word from, we have a little soundtrack, from the bill sponsor, Representative Aaron Regenberg, as the House sponsor, and then we'll start.
Well, I just want to thank, first of all, Hudson Street Deli for hosting us. I don't know about you, Earl, but I'm here for the sandwiches. And I'm grateful to everyone for being here. We've been working on this earned sick time bill for a while now, and it's been great to have the support of so many community-minded business owners. We know that this is a policy idea that is good for workers and that can be good for employers as well, and that there's no fundamental conflict between those two things. Policies can be good for both. The businesses that you all run show that every day, and so really appreciative for your input in this whole process, and I'm looking forward to hear the conversation. So thanks again.
Great. My name is Hollis Roseman. I'm the State Director for Rhode Island Working Families and get to chair the coalition that works on the campaign for earned sick days. And I don't have a lot to say myself today, but I'm going to moderate the conversation here. And we'll start just by hearing a little bit from each of you, and then I have some questions, and we'll take some other questions as well. So, Brian Wright, we're going to start with you. Brian's the owner of Hudson Street Deli, which has so graciously offered to host us here today, and he and his wife have owned it since 2014, and in that few short years grown it a bunch. And I wonder if you would just talk a little bit about your experience and your new earned sick leave policy.
Sure. So we were approached, earlier this year, and basically wanted an idea of what we thought about the proposed legislation, and it was honestly like close enough to what we already offered that we were just like, yeah, this just makes sense. Let's just implement what the policy has. And so what that extension did for our employees was before it didn't apply to our part-timers. We have a few part-timers, and so and we had preloaded the sick time at the beginning of the year, and all we did was just implement for this year, this 2017 fiscal year. We just implemented it so that it tracks, every 30 hours someone works, they get 1 hour of sick time. That's across the board for part-time and full-time. And our employees were really excited about that, especially, we have a lot of people where they've never had sick time before. And so this is something that is kind of, to them, unheard of. They didn't expect it. They thought maybe if I worked for a big corporation, I might be able to get it. But, we have a few moms, and a dad, upcoming dad, and so they're also really excited to have that protection that, if they need to take a day out of work, whether it's for themselves or their family members, they can do so without sacrificing, any pay.
Great. Jessica Rhodes is next. Jessica is the founder and CEO of Warwick-based Interview Connections, which is a podcast agency and booking service. And she works very closely with her staff. And you guys have had a sick days policy. It's a little different than this, but for a while. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how that works in your company.
Yeah, I've been in business for 4 years, but I just have recently hired W-2 employees. So it's all very new for me to have a staff of 6 full-time employees, and I define full-time as 30 hours or more. So my staff is anywhere from 30 to 40 hours a week. And when I was hiring my employees, I have an HR person, and I was just talking with her. I'm like, what am I required to offer? What should I offer? Like, there's a lot that goes into hiring and having employees. And she told me, well, in Rhode Island, under 50 employees, you don't have to offer any benefits. And I was like, well, I mean, I feel like I should. So she's advised me on the law, but she's very worker friendly too. And so I decided to offer 6 days of paid time off a year. So we use that, however. And then when I saw this legislation, I expanded it to be as close to what the legislation says is possible, and I am totally in support of. I think your bill says 7 days of PTO, and so I've adjusted it since I hired all my employees to expand to 30 or more hours before I headed full-time as defined as 40, and all 6 of my employees are at least 30 hours or more, so I didn't want to exclude like the 2 people that couldn't work 40 hours because of health or something like that. And what I found is that, you know, they're very thankful for it, they don't abuse it, and it's used in times when they absolutely need it. So I see it as a good thing to have for business, and it's affordable too. It's not like people are abusing it and using it all the time. It's something that they're earning.
Great. Next we have Jason Ship Orion, who works in healthcare. He has years of management experience and a background in organizational psychology and finance. So
that's true. So I came to this in talking with Aaron, and and Aaron was very interested in impact, which I thought was amazing for a legislator, proposing a policy like this. And we had a really robust conversation, and I, just coming from a healthcare background, one of the things I cued into is the need for this to be a legislative effort and not ad hoc. We are in a labor-intensive business. Our healthcare business employs 30 full-time, 30 part-time people. And if we were to implement this as is, we would be at a competitive disadvantage. We would probably have to pay people less per hour, and then say, hey, you get these benefits. And that's a false choice. If we're really going to implement this, you don't want someone down the street who's in the same business giving someone a little bit more an hour, but no benefits. So that instantly stood out as just an issue of basic fairness. And also in healthcare, this is very important for 2 reasons. One is that the health aspects of this, public health aspects. We have a responsibility to our residents. We don't want people coming in sick, because this spreads, sickness in our facilities. So as a fundamental business practice, it's a huge benefit. And also from the perspective of keeping people safe. This is really important because we employ a lot of single moms, and domestic violence issues can and do come up. So I feel personally connected, having seen that, personally connected to the aspects of the bill that protect people and make sure that their jobs are safe when these big events come up. And I think that, and then lastly, in a strategic and broader sense, I just wanted to say that we think a lot these days about investing in high-tech workers and investing in the middle class and extending educational benefits. I don't understand why we don't think as seriously about investing in, working people.
Yes.
And this is a big part of our labor portfolio. It sends a message about values to high-tech employers who want to know what state they're working in and keeping their people in. So that was very important to me as well. I think it's a worthy investment. Thanks.
Next we have Susan Counsel. Susan has 30 years of experience in HR management, although she's now retired, consulting with small, mid, and Fortune 200 businesses. And she also is part of a family that has a family business for many generations.
I am. Thank you, Georgia. And hello, everybody. I'm almost certain I am the newest Rhode Islander in the group. So let me just say, it is wonderful to be in this state. I feel a sense of energy and a sort of a can-do spirit that I haven't seen in every place where I've worked. And I love that, and I love the stories of these small business owners here, because you're talking about the new work culture, which is the work culture that I love and that I support and I respect, and that will pay so many dividends. So I want to talk just for a minute about the fact that I consider myself a business person as well as an HR person, and that's important because some of the pushback about any legislation that affects employees is going to come from business owners and key managers in business who may feel jammed up and don't want to deal with a new opportunity or a new problem. I always see those problems as real opportunities, and that's my experience. My experience is with very small companies, including startups, mid-sized companies, and as Georgia said, larger companies. I usually was in the position of having to go into the company, live in the company, so to speak, learn the company and learn the industry so that I could be effective. And that's one of the reasons I consider myself a business person. I also was self-employed during a lot of those 30 years. Now, interesting, my last work was with turnarounds, and those are the businesses that are on the brink and may be failing. And my last client in that part of the business was my family. We are fourth generation, so we have one on you.
Okay. Great.
And we actually have at least one fifth generation member as well. This happened about 12 years ago. We faced a perfect storm. We had a huge leadership transition, and my brother looked at my sister and me and said, we have at best a couple of months. We have to do something or that's it. So if you're fourth generation or third generation, or you can't fail the previous generations, and you can't look behind you and see your children and grandchildren and know that you would fail them too. The point about that is about taking risk and being willing to try new ideas, make your best call, know that everything you have is on the line, but you still have to make that call. And it's also about trusting your employees. This is key. We did turn ourselves away. We had to push off vendors. We had to explain to them why. We had to push off customers. We had to explain to them why. We had to talk to our employees and tell them how bad things were. But we made the choice that we would not lay anyone off. That was not a part of our culture. It was not a part of our history. We made the choice that we would not strip anyone of pay. And although many of the benefits that we provided were voluntary, we didn't even consider touching those. It was about maintaining our culture and maintaining those relationships that we had. We actually increased pay for probably a third of our workers in one job, and struggled every week to meet payroll for a few months. But our team responded to us because we asked this, and because they knew they had trusted us over the years. We got incredible production. We shipped, we got orders, we began to pay back vendors, and then we began to put some money into a slow series of long-term improvements. And we made it. And that was 13 years ago. We're still in business. So my feeling about the employees is simple. You take care of your team. Your team will take care of you. We've seen that over and over again. I can transition that thought into anybody's business, any size business, and actually any style business if the owner is willing to work on style and culture. And I see the 40% of Rhode Island employees who don't have paid sick and safety leave as being people who are not being treated fairly. I see their employers as pushing off costs back to the employee and pushing off costs to the community and the state, all of its agencies, and all the taxpayers. Kudos to the 60% of workers who got it through their great employers. But the others have to do it. And my last point is that if employers have not seen fit to come through with this on their own, then the next step is the state. And it is the role of the state. To all the legislators out there, this is systemic. And the change will not come unless you speak up and step up and stand in. So please do. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Doug Hall. Doug Hall is the Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy for the Economic Progress Institute, one of the great coalition members working on this. Doug has studied poverty and labor markets extensively, and he's an expert in a lot of things we care about, including retirement security, minimum wage, economic development, and of course paid sick days. And he has a PhD from Queen's University.
Great. Thank you so much, Georgia, and thank you to all of you who came and brought your real world experiences. From a guy who spends his time mostly behind the computer terminal crunching data, I know that the numbers that I see in front of me reflect the realities of real people and real lives, but it's always great to see how that plays out in reality. So I want to give you a general sense of what the experience has been with paid sick leave legislation that has passed in other jurisdictions. Contrary to what you might hear, we are not some crazy outlier state when it comes to the fact that we're looking very seriously at adopting earned sick leave. We are part of a coalition of national groups coordinated by Family Values at Work, representing 24 states that have been pushing this legislation forward. There have been 40 different jurisdictions, including state and local jurisdictions, that have adopted some sort of earned sick leave legislation in recent years. And I can tell you that from when I first started working on this issue, several years ago, helping folks in Connecticut pass their legislation, we've seen a sea change, and it's now very much emerged, and certainly as Jason was mentioning, it's very much seen now, I think, as a critical component of workforce development. We talk a lot about wanting to be a business-friendly state. We also want to be a worker-friendly state. We want to be a state where the very best and the very brightest want to come here because we have the sorts of family-supporting worker policies that they want to have in their lives and for their families. So one of the things that we hear is that Rhode Island's economy, we've been a little slower coming out of the recession than other states were, and so, is this the best time to do this? Well, we actually look at the other states that have adopted earned sick leave legislation. What you'll see is that our current unemployment rate, which is I think 4.3%, is the second lowest of all the states. If you sort of look through the list, only Vermont, which had a 3.3 unemployment rate when it passed their legislation, was less than ours. You move up the list, you get Arizona at 5.2%, Massachusetts at 5.8%, and Connecticut at 8.9%. There's some others in the mix there as well. So you can see that we're actually in a comparatively strong place in terms of how our current economy is doing. The experience elsewhere, in every state, you can be very sure that the naysayers came out and said, no, the sky is going to fall if we adopt this. That, in fact, has not been the experience. In fact, the opposite has been the case. If you look at San Francisco, when they adopted their earned sick leave legislation, in the years following their adoption of that, their employment in the key industries affected their growth was double what it was in surrounding counties that had not adopted earned sick leave. So this is actually good for the economy, in part because it provides stability, it provides employees with an incentive to, as you were suggesting, be loyal, so it reduces turnover. It levels the playing field, which is great. It provides a level of certainty for all industries because they know what the law is and they know they have to follow that. We hear from the business community all the time that uncertainty is their enemy. We want to share some certainty around this issue. And it's certainly something that is very helpful for families as well. The research on this is very clear. Organizations like the Center for Economic Policy Research, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, the Economic Policy Institute, they all state very clearly that the economic benefits of adopting earned sick leave outweigh any costs. There was actually an Institute for Women's Policy Research study that looked specifically at Rhode Island, and according to their calculations, employers would see a $2.9 million net gain from adopting earned sick leave, and the community would see gains of about $5.9 million. So that's close to $9 million a year just here in Rhode Island from adopting earned sick leave. And we think that that's very clear that that's the right way to go. One other reason that hasn't been highlighted that we definitely need to adopt this, and that other states need to as well, is that as with just about anything else out there, we see huge inequality. And it's the folks at the lower end of the income spectrum who don't have earned sick leave and the folks at the very top that do have it. If you compare folks at the bottom 25% of the income distribution, only 39% in 2016 had earned sick leave nationally. Compare that to the top end where 87% had it. The other very good news is that because all these states and localities have been adopting earned sick leave, those gaps have actually been closing. So we know that the legislation is doing what it's supposed to do. It's providing earned sick leave for families that allows them to take care of themselves and to not have to choose between caring for a sick toddler and being able to afford food at the end of the month. And we think that for that reason and many others, it's important that Rhode Island adopt this legislation.
I just have a couple questions, and we'll see if other folks have questions as well. And I just want to start off by this one. I think a bunch of you talked about the benefits that this had for your workers, and a few of you sort of alluded to the fact that that sort of comes back to the business. If you were to articulate for your business, why does this make sense from a business perspective? You don't all have to answer that, but if anyone wants to jump in there, that would be great.
Sure. So on a business side, anyone that actually sits down and does the numbers and figures out, okay, if I need to hire someone new because they weren't happy working for me, I'm going to have to pay them to come in. I'm going to have to pay somebody else to train them, as well as the cost of training that person. And then, of course, there'll be a learning curve too. So there may be a bit of a time where I'm going to have to overstaff, to help that person make sure that they learn and when they're on board. And that's no guarantee that they're even going to stay either. Maybe 6 months, after they're fully trained up, or 3 months after they're trained up, depending on the industry. They might decide to move on as well, or you might have more turnover. When we first purchased the business, there was this immediate thing, kind of what you touched on, where this is just the right thing to do. Why wouldn't we be offering these types of things to our employees? They're the ones on the front line. They're the ones with the customers, and unless you're a business owner that you're the only person that has the interaction with your customers, your employees are the ones that are going to have that impact. The customers are going to see how happy they are. The customers are going to then come back. They're going to recommend going back to your business, or recommend to other people for your business to grow. It was just a no-brainer for us to implement that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Just reducing employee turnover is one of the biggest reasons why this is a benefit for business. In my company, we book entrepreneurs for interviews on podcasts, so it's sort of a publicity strategy. And our clients are owners of multiple seven-figure businesses. When their agent leaves Interview Connections and they have to be introduced to someone else, they don't like that. They're like, I gotta meet somebody new. So for me, it's very valuable to have my booking agents, my employees, stay around for a long time, because the stronger my employees' relationship is with our clients, the longer my clients stay with me. So retention of both employees and clients is very profitable.
Yeah, I think the value, just to speak to that, the value of our businesses is in our employees, and they're our biggest asset. And I think we're all on the same page. It's very uncontroversial to say that investing in them makes sense. And on an ad hoc basis, whenever these things come up, we always respond, because we always want to keep people who are experienced and well trained and who have been with us. And you don't want new people coming in, and it's very expensive. So all we're saying is formalize that, and I think that that's just better from a policy standpoint. Why do you want to live in a state that doesn't do things like that? Why? I mean, it's kind of a weird idea, and we're talking about 40% of folks, and I think that's why you have to do this in a public way and through legislation, because obviously smart business people are going to look around and say, my employees would be very unhappy, they don't have sick time, so you're going to value people like that. And I think on an ad hoc basis, you might feel that way about your employees, but if you don't do this as a group, you don't end up valuing your employees that way. And I think, and also it's because it's hard. How can we measure systemic effects, right? And so you have a theory that either your employees are, you have a positive view of what people can do and are, or you have a negative view, like people are a cost center or people are my business. And so, if you're in our camp, it's pretty obvious that this should be the law, and we should invest in our people. So.
The evidence is pretty strong that the people who don't have earned sick days, and it is kind of a lot, it's about 170,000 workers in Rhode Island, are concentrated in a couple of industries. They're concentrated in food service industries, in healthcare, and in childcare industries. So I wonder if, and when we think about this, we certainly start to think about public health issues. So I wonder if those of you in those kind of industries would talk a little bit about how you thought about the public health stuff.
Okay, me. So, so it's not uncomplicated or inexpensive to implement this sort of policy, but it is extremely beneficial. And it's beneficial because you have a psychological contract with the people working for you, and especially when it comes to their own health. I mean, why, if you're in this business, you should be leading the charge. And the people who are really opposing it are people who are in staffing agencies, who are existing on that margin, that very thin margin, and they're going to have to pass through those costs in their model, in their business model. The people who have long-term employees in these organizations, I think, can take a longer-term view of this, and I would encourage them to. But it isn't uncontroversial. I mean, it is difficult to see your way through this. Again, it's a systemic effect, and it's a long-term, investment. So you're going to get natural fear and trepidation about this, and whenever you have like a payroll check to write, or you're looking at your costs, everyone starts to shift their feet and get nervous. And the first thing I did was look at the financial impact and think about the cost benefit. And I think it makes sense, as a person in the community, you can't take it with you, If you're in these businesses, you're a custodian, you're part of the team, but we're not pharaohs, we're Americans, we're not going to bury all the gold with us when we go. That's not how it works. And you have to live in a community and live a life, and this is part of, I think, common sense, community-focused, policy. But just to respond specifically to healthcare, it's a big deal in a healthcare facility that people don't show up sick. They don't have incentives to hide illnesses, and especially when I think it's also we don't talk about disproportional impact. When you have an executive level job, you've got a little bit of a cushion. For folks who are working, there's no cushion. Like something can come along and derail a person's life. You don't have the time or buffer to get yourself back together. And just doing that is going to have a huge impact that's vastly disproportionate to the expense. So why wouldn't we want that for our employees? I mean, effectively do it. But, why wouldn't we want that for all of our community members and all of our employees, and people in our neighborhoods and so.
Did you think about the public health aspect when you were thinking about this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't want to put anybody in the place, like you said, where they have to make that decision of possibly hiding an illness or coming in when they really shouldn't be, especially when they're serving food and they're interacting with the public like on a daily basis as well. It was just something that we felt very strongly.
Georgia, I can't speak from the healthcare perspective, but I actually can relate very much to this. If we think about the healthcare industry, if we think about restaurants, if we think about the hospitality industry, school bus drivers who I know have testified do not have sick benefits and have testified at the State House in favor of this bill, CNAs, so many of the caring professions. We can also think about the message from the employer to those team members. If those same team members who give care to others, who are paid to give care to others, and build the owner's brand, if they are not also given care themselves. So to me, it's not even just about the fact that the sick leave pay, although extremely important, is going to be there. It's also about messaging. It's about your statement about the worth of the jobs. that are being performed and the value that you place on the individuals who work with you and do those jobs so beautifully. Without benefits and let's extend this and say perhaps always keeping persons at minimum pay, owners can't really send that message, and it devalues the work that the person does and the work ethic that the person continues to bring to that job year after year with not the payback that is really deserved. That, again, that's a systemic problem, and that's a problem that we need to take care of.
Can I just respond? I just want to say one brief thing, because it's something I notice, and I'm more on the finance side, but I've been in our family business my whole life. My first job was stocking cans, in the kitchen shelves in the back, and so I've been there, and some of my best friends as a kid were older people. I'd go sit next to them and talk about baseball or whatever it was. You can't pay people for their humanity. There's no dollar figure you can put on it. You can either enable it, create an environment that enables it, or not. And I think we try to do that. We try to set up a business so that people can come. It's not caring for people isn't a business, it's a calling. And I see that. It's not the hourly rate that's getting folks to be kind and thoughtful or to think about our residents. It's the fact that we've set up an environment where that's possible. So I have a lot of respect for that, because it's almost magical. I mean, we're not paying like a lot more than a regular job. People come in and they do unbelievably special things for our residents, and when you see that, this stuff is a no-brainer. You obviously want to create a world where that kind of care is possible, and to live in that world. So anyway.
Great. Does anyone else out here have any questions they'd like to ask? Questions? All right. Anybody have something they're dying to conclude with, and then we'll just eat the delicious sandwiches that we have.
Yeah, I'll just add something, building off of what he said. My business is we're an internet business, so I don't have clients and customers coming and going. And before this year, all of my team members were independent contractors, and they were all over the country, and I interacted with them virtually. So it was very they did the work, I paid them, and there was no personal interaction. And the biggest difference that I've noticed of having employees that comes to my office, there's just so much more of a personal connection to the people that I pay to do work at my company. The mood each day in the office is so delicate. If somebody is not feeling well, or if somebody had a death in the family, that affects the entire office. And so I have noticed that the big difference in my life now as not just a business owner but an employer is that I am not just paying people to perform a service for me, I'm supporting them, and they're supporting my business. And so I think that as an employer, you have a responsibility to take care of the people that are working for you.
Amen.
Anyone else have a final thought they'd like to add? No, I think we'll wrap up and eat sandwiches then, but...